Hello and welcome to Reporters, the show that brings you the best of France 24 reporting from around the world. In this programme, Nathan King will be joining me from the United States to discuss the ongoing oil disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. How often we've heard the phrase America's worst environmental disaster. So much, in fact, it's almost begun to lose its meaning. But as this report shows, the lives of tens of thousands of people and a fragile ecosystem may never be the same again.
Venice Louisiana, a small port at the end of this peninsula, surrounded by swamps, or the bayous as they're called here. Because this oil spill is gushing from so far beneath the surface, it's not like the others. The oil hits the shores in small patches, carried by the tide and the winds. Barely visible, but it envelops all who live here. Especially Jimmy, a shrimper here for the past 40 years. Jordan, the environmental activist who tracks the oil. And on his airboat, Brad, the duck hunter. These three have nothing in common, but in the last 2 months, they have all seen their lives turned upside down by this near invisible menace.
I love everything about this freedom of working for yourself. I've done this my whole life.
At 62, Jimmy has spent his life fishing these waters. A hard life, but one that suits this man who faces life head on. Oil slick or not, he's determined to go fishing.
We're going in the area called Little Lake, Yellow Cotton Bay, Shishira, and we're going to be trying to catch the shrimp.
It's still early in the morning, but Jimmy is surprised by a flotilla of boats already returning to port.
You heard that?
Yeah, what did he say?
I asked him what was going on. He said it's got a squall coming, and it ain't coming till about 12 o'clock. And he said they called the whole crew back in. And he says it's a big joke. They don't know what they're doing.
Jimmy knows these fishermen well. Now, however, they work for BP, helping with the cleanup. They earn up to $3,000 per day per boat. But today, back in port, paid to do nothing.
What it is? What it is? You got it, huh? I asked him what was going on. He said it was a joke. In other words, things is not going like good at all. He's pissed off. Nobody knows what's going on, you know. They tell you to go out. They tell you to come in. Do this, and then they say, no, don't do that, you know. They don't know what, no organization, no, they don't know what they're talking about, you know.
So Jimmy prefers to try his luck at shrimping. Depending on the day and where the oil is, Louisiana allows fishing in some areas not yet affected by the spill. Force of habit drives him on in spite of everything.
Now we shrimping.
For 40 years, Jimmy has done this, a man of the sea connected to these waters. However, the oil is just a few miles away from here at the entrance to this marsh.
And when it comes in the marsh, it's gonna kill. It's gonna be like the plague. It's gonna kill everything.
It's the oil that Jordan is searching for. She works for the Sierra Club, one of America's oldest environmental groups. Today she's taking out local photographers so they can document what is happening. Headed for Barataria Bay, yesterday a huge slick of oil was reportedly moving into these waters. At first she is reassured. A flotilla of fishing boats employed by BP are busy cleaning up the oil. But for her it is too little, too late.
It's clear that they could have been using this type of equipment and this type of technology weeks ago, before it ever got into these waters.
Here we see small patches of oil on land. It's a big ocean, as BP have reminded us, but the oil is more and more visible.
It's incredibly thick.
The booms laid to protect the land seem to be useless. They're quickly overwhelmed and the oil seeps in regardless. It's the dolphin that we've been worried about, but it's an oil pelican the group spots first, bobbing on the ocean, unable to move its feet. He's been here for just a few minutes, but already a wildlife team arrives at the scene. Within seconds, he is caught and put in a net. Taken on board by the Louisiana wildlife team, he will be taken back to shore for cleaning, then released.
How many of y'all found today?
For what you're doing.
Good.
And I'm glad they're out here. I mean, we literally stumbled upon this bird 30 seconds ago when they were right behind us.
Oh, peace and quiet.
For Jimmy, it's time for a rest.
You don't hear nothing but God out here. He'll talk to you.
What's he saying today?
He says, I've been blessed all my life.
The joy of being on his boat has not gone away. He still enjoys the small pleasures like lunch of a crab caught the day before on this very boat. But the fishing is a lot worse than before. The best areas are closed and all the shrimpers are plying the same waters.
Bad weather coming. It's not very well, not good. It's not very much.
Too many shrimpers, not enough shrimp. Too much effort for very little catch. Jimmy decides to head for port. The swamp is still beautiful, but it can no longer support the people who live here. Even though Jimmy is angry at what BP has done, he is still willing to work for them.
If they hire me, I will go to work for them. I have no choice. And I've never worked for anybody in the public, any companies in my life.
Back at port, his catch is unloaded, and it is far from reassuring. The shrimp are sorted and cleaned. Normally a good day of shrimping can net Jimmy $1,200. Today his catch nets him just $140.
Get on your radio and call them bird people. There's a bird right around the corner there.
On Jordan's boat, another oiled bird is spotted. This one sits at the edge of an island, unable to move its wings.
He is all scunged up. He's standing there like this with his wings all stuck together.
Inside the boom or outside?
Inside the boom, right on the rock.
We'll call wildlife if they're cast out.
David is the boat's captain. He's an old hand that has ferried anglers to the best fishing grounds here for over 30 years. He's also worked in the oil industry, like almost all those from here who are not fishermen. And on the future of the oil industry, he and Jordan are in total disagreement.
Unless we had some today we could switch over to some other source of fuel, we have to drill. We have to get our stuff.
I think we've definitely brought ourselves to the point where we have a serious addiction to oil. We need to move ourselves into a new clean energy economy. Oil is a finite resource.
Jimmy is back at home. On the porch, he recounts his poor day's catch to his girlfriend, Irene. She worries about the hit to their income, but is more concerned about Jimmy's morale.
If Jimmy can't fish, I don't know. You know, just since he can't do what he's used to doing, he's a totally different man. You know, and taking this away from him, I don't know what it would be like to live with him. Or for him to live with himself. You know, that's Jimmy. That's Jimmy. That's his life. He lives for that.
Jimmy and Irene have already suffered the hardships of living in the heart of Louisiana.
I was very glad to have it because I had nothing.
Back in 2005, they lived in this mobile home for 3 years after Hurricane Katrina destroyed everything they had. They now live in the house that Jimmy built with his own hands.
I like the flavor of seasoning.
Irene is preparing tonight's meal, Jimmy's favorite dish, a stew of Cajun shrimp. She may be the cook, but it's always part of Jimmy's catch that they eat.
Give me my crabs and my shrimp and my crawfish. My least favorite is fish, but now I love my fish too.
As dinner is ready, once again, the generous marshes of Louisiana will provide them with their meal. But for how long? It's more than the food, but their way of life that they risk losing in this oil spill. Living and making their living from Mother Nature seems suddenly threatened.
I eat that, I'll be ready for the sack, Jackson.
On his airboat, Brad crosses the bayou. He lives far from here in Georgia, where he's a technician on military aircraft. But he is often called to the marshes of Louisiana, especially by the ducks he loves to hunt.
We've got our fall migration that's coming out starting in September.
That's right.
And the ducks from Canada will be making their way south. After that, there'll just be buku and buku of ducks coming down. And this is where we hunt.
Duck hides dot the landscape. When the season comes, Brad will spend many hours in here.
You may make some coffee, you may do whatever. Maybe you already had breakfast, or you just wait on the sun to come up, wait for your shooting light to take place, and then the ducks start coming in.
But then he remembers and reality hits.
I'm pretty ticked off about it. Main fear is that all the ducks that will pile in here, how will they go back to Canada and nest again? It's really hard to describe and hard to explain if you're not a waterfowler, if you're not a hunter, that the disaster that's going to take place. It's more than just what it seems like to a lot of people. The magnitude of it is incomprehensible.
You just have to travel through the bayou with Brad on his airboat to understand the magic of this place. You can appreciate too the fragility of the natural environment. The oil has yet to threaten these marshes, but hurricane season is upon us, and one direct hit could bring the oil in, or even a simple natural movement of the tides could change everything. Brad knows it, and like others, he can only fear the worst. And try to enjoy the beauty of a sunset on the bayou while there is still time.
Well, joining me now is Nathan King, one of the journalists behind that report. Nathan, thanks for being with us. Now, as we saw there, the cleanup goes on almost daily, but the oil, of course, is still leaking. It's heartbreaking in its futility.
Yeah, it's incredible when you see those little skimmers out there, lots of little boats dotted around, and it gives you some sort of sense of the chaotic nature of this cleanup. There was nothing really in reserve for a spill of this magnitude. In fact, only in the last 24 hours are we actually learning that big oil companies are now coming together to get some sort of rapid response. But you can see with all those little skimmers out there, with the impromptu bird rescue, that really this thing has been cobbled together. And there was no real plan. And every time they seem to bring in new equipment, it doesn't work that well. Remember, just last week they brought in this big ship, a whale, called the Whale, which hopefully could have skimmed all that oil off, and it just didn't. And also, with the use of dispersants at the wellhead, it's really broken up this oil, and it comes in clumps, as you see, very difficult to spot, and it really is heartbreaking. Now, obviously, the oil hasn't been flowing for the last few days because of this containment cap, but with bad weather coming and a possibility of opening again for as much as 2 weeks, we could see another big surge of oil into that marsh.
And of course, this is a very fragile ecosystem, a lot of wildlife living in those marshes. When, if ever, might they return to normal there?
That's right. You know, Jimmy Chabreau had it right when he said this is like the hatchery. You know, when oil chokes off those reeds, those grasses, basically very little, not just plants can't grow, but things like shrimp can't lay their eggs, and other wildlife really do get threatened as well. And the big question is not necessarily when this will come back to normal, but when the oil will stop flowing. They can only really get a handle on how much damage has done to this fragile ecosystem when the oil stops flowing. Now, we've been talking about mid-August. Well, that could be delayed. And if it goes on through the hurricane season where you have oil being pushed into these grasses, as is the fear this weekend coming up, that could really affect it. Now, it depends on where you are on the Gulf Coast, depending on how complicated it is to clean up. Beaches are easier. You can scoop up the oil, you can throw it away. Those grasses, very, very difficult. When it's in the marsh, it's in the marsh. We've even seen people there with handy wipes, wiping grasses stem by stem. That really isn't a coordinated response, really, is it?
And we shouldn't underestimate the economic impact either, Nathan. People who are working in the fishing industry, people working in the tourism industry, some livelihoods have been completely wiped out, haven't they?
Absolutely. BP have announced that they've already paid out $200 million in claims. Remember, they had that $20 billion escrow fund. We're not going to know the full cost of this until the oil has stopped and everything is cleaned up. But I can tell you, the fishing industry there has been decimated, especially things like oysters, shrimping. Even though some grounds have remained open, very few of the rich fishing grounds have as well. And even though oil isn't everywhere on the Gulf Coast, people just don't want to go down to a coast that may be spoiled. So the number of cancellations along the Gulf Coast has been quite incredible. So we're really going to have to count the cost over the coming weeks, the coming months. But what's really interesting is that even though an oil company has really threatened Louisiana's economy, most people, when you speak to in Louisiana, want to keep the oil companies there. They want to keep deep water drilling there too, because they know it's really an economic boon for their state.
All right, Nathan King, many thanks indeed for joining us. And that's all we have time for in this edition of Reporters. Many thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.